Hello. Do you ever imagine that you're someone else? Or sometimes, when you're reading an adventure story, do you start to imagine that the adventures are really happening to you? Well, if you do, then you're ready for today's story of The Little Yellow Van in Adventure Street. The little yellow van belonged to Mr. Williams. Mr. Williams was a window cleaner, and each day they went to a different place, and the little yellow van waited in the road while Mr. Williams cleaned the windows. There was one particular place they went to that the little yellow van liked best of all. This place was called Adventure Street. He liked it best because all the houses had names on their gates instead of just numbers. And so he was very pleased indeed when Mr. Williams said, "Well, Sunshine, we're off to Adventure Street today." The first house they stopped at had a high brick wall, and the name on the big brown gate was Milestones. "First stop, Milestones," said Mr. Williams. "I'll be back in 20 minutes. And away he went. The little yellow van thought about milestones. He thought about miles and miles of road. He thought about roads going to faraway places. And then he wasn't a little yellow van anymore. Instead, he was a rumbling, long-distance lorry riding south with a heavy load. His powerful engine pulled and roared. His great grey wheels turned and turned. The only time they stopped was at a transport cafe, where the driver had fish and chips and 2 mugs of tea. Then, "Time to get a move on now," said the driver. "We've a long way to go. Time to get a move on." But it wasn't the driver. It was Mr. Williams. "Time to get a move on," said Mr. Williams. "Come along, Sunshine. Time to move on." On they went, to a long, low house with a low white fence and a white gate. The name on the gate was King's Keep. "This'll take me an hour," said Mr. Williams. "King's Keep is a long job." The little yellow van thought about kings and queens and princes and beautiful princesses. Most of all, he thought about princesses. Then he wasn't a little yellow van anymore. He was a golden coach drawn by 6 grey horses. He came through the gates of a royal palace, splendid, gleaming as gold as the sun, carrying a princess dressed in white. They went through the streets of a great city, and the people waved and cheered and cheered. "Hooray! Hooray! Hooray!" they called. But it wasn't the people. It was Mr. Williams. "Hooray!" said Mr. Williams. "That's the job done. Off we go, Sunshine, round the corner." The little yellow van signalled left and went around the corner to a small grey house hiding behind a grey stone wall. The name on the gate was the Corner House. "Shan't be long," said Mr. Williams. "The windows are small in the corner house." The little yellow van thought about corners. He thought about awkward, tight little corners, and sharp corners, and wide, sweeping corners. He wished that he could swish around corners fast instead of having to go so slowly. Then he wasn't a little yellow van anymore. He was a racing car, speeding round a racetrack, trying to beat the other cars. Crowds of people watched him in wonder as he sped down the straight and came to a corner. Fast and fearless, around he swished, his huge tires slithering and sliding and squealing. The people seemed to hold their breath as he raced towards the finishing line. "Nearly finished," said his struggling engine. "Nearly finished. Finished. Finished." But it wasn't his engine. It was Mr. Williams. "Nearly finished," said Mr. Williams. "One more job, and then we'll stop." The last house they went to had round windows, looking like portholes on a ship. The name on the gate was Starboard Light. "Starboard Light," said Mr. Williams. "That's a light on a ship, so they tell me. This house belongs to an old sea captain." The little yellow van thought about the sea and sunshine bright on blue water and golden sands and happy children. Then he wasn't a little yellow van anymore. Instead, he was an ice cream van at the seaside. He had letters printed on his side which said ices, lollies, cornets and tubs, strawberry, chocolate, coffee and vanilla. Everybody came to buy ice cream from him, and he felt very important and useful. And he thought, how very lucky I am to be at the seaside on a day like this. But it wasn't his thoughts. It was Mr. Williams. "On a day like this," said Mr. Williams, "I'm thinking the best place to be is at the seaside. So tomorrow, sunshine, that's where we'll go." So next day, the little yellow van set off with Mr. Williams, Mrs. Williams, John Williams, and Susan Williams, and he carried them happily and safely to the seaside. "Such a useful little van," said Mr. Williams. "I don't know what I'd do without him," said the little yellow van. And he thought, it was fun being a long-distance lorry, and a golden coach, and a racing car, and an ice cream van. It was fun while it lasted. But the best thing to be in all the world is just myself, a little yellow van. Well, I hope you liked that story. The best bit for me was when the little yellow van was at the seaside as an ice cream van, and I imagined that I was first in the queue. Anyhow, that's all we have time for today, but I look forward to seeing you again soon.